I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. And today we're talking about how to use craftsmanship as a method for slowing down. And we're going to cover why it can be so hard to slow down, techniques you can incorporate into any project to slow down, and the types of projects that'll help you increase your craftsmanship and slow down as a consequence. All right, we'll start with an icebreaker. Haley, what creative hobbies have you always wanted to try?
A hobby that I have been meaning to check out for what feels like forever is ceramics. I have nothing to support this idea, but I feel like I would be really good at it.
You probably would.
I like hobbies that have a physical aspect to them.
Yeah, it's very physical.
Because I feel like that takes you out of your head a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I would really like that.
Yeah, it's very physical. You use a lot of core. I took a couple ceramics classes in the last few years, and it's physically demanding. Mm-hmm. It's fun, though. It's really fun. It's very tactile, the feeling of the clay.
And it just sounds fun to get all messy. Mm-hmm. I love making a mess.
Yeah.
That's fun to me. So one of these days I'll make my dream a reality.
Yeah, you can do it.
What about you, Sarah? Is there any kind of creative hobby you've always wanted to try?
Well, one thing I want to do is I've been thinking about designing some textiles, so designing some fabrics to print with spoon flour and actually make into clothing. That's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and just learn more about designing repeating patterns and things like that. I think would be really, really fun. Yeah. I like to draw, so I think I would really enjoy it. I just haven't sat down and made the time to actually learn about it. I was thinking about taking a class or something, an online class, and learning a little bit about it, because I use Procreate to draw on my iPad, and I feel like I could turn that into some pretty cool designs if I took the time to learn a little bit more.
Totally.
That's one that I really want to try. I think most of the creative hobbies I've wanted to try, I've done it, at least dabbled a little bit,
Yeah.
But there are definitely things that I want to do more of that I haven't made the time to do. It's hard. There's so much fun stuff to do out there.
I know. And I am a serial dabbler.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I've got my core hobbies, like sewing and knitting, gardening, all that stuff. But I like to dabble in a lot of different things and see what suits me.
You never know when you're going to find your next core hobby, you know?
Yeah. Or things you can incorporate. I've been doing some embroidery. I made that embroidered Ames blouse that's on YouTube now. And it was really, really fun. I want to do more embroidery. I think it would be really cool to do some kind of art quilt or something that incorporates embroidery and quilting. It'd be really, really cool and fun. I wish I had all the time in the world to do these things.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. So many ideas. Well, if you have an icebreaker for us for a future episode and you're a Seamwork member, you can leave it at seamwork.com/go/icebreakers. And there's a thread there where you can post your idea, and we'll probably use it on a future episode. We love to use your icebreaker, so let us know if you have one. All right. So today we're talking about using craftsmanship as a way to slow down. And we just want to mention that we know the word craftsmanship or craftsman is a gendered word, and we were trying to think of a word that didn't have that, and we could not think of one that conveyed the same meaning, and craftspersonship is kind of unwieldy. So if you have one, let us know. We would love to know what it is. We're just going to use that word because it's the only word that we can think of. So in an abstract sense, I think we all know that sewing and developing our craft is a really excellent way to slow down. But at the same time, I think we spend so much of our days just really pedal to the metal and just hurtling through our list of to-dos. When it comes time to slow down and actually focus and be mindful, that can be really hard. I think we're just so used to operating in that mode that switching gears into a slower mode and remembering that sewing is a way to slow down and not just be go, 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 and also not just be in that kind of acquisitive dopamine driven now mode is what sewing is, partially about. So that I think can be a real challenge for a lot of us. And when it comes to making your projects, I think, the patterns themselves, they aren't always written in a way to help you slow down, because designers really want to help you get there quickly and easily. And, they're writing for everybody. They're writing pattern instructions for everybody. So most people don't want the slowest method to make something.
Yeah.
But occasionally you might want to slow down, and you might need to slow down, or you might want to do things in such a way that really exercises those craft muscles and really put a lot more thought into things. So we're going to talk about some ways to do that today. So sometimes you just need a little extra direction to help you find those moments, because they're not necessarily going to be in your pattern instructions, and you need to think a little bit about it. So Haley, can you think of a moment in a pattern's construction recently that did make you stop and slow down?
I've been making lots of tops recently, fairly easy tops. What was the last thing that forced me to slow down? Oh, I sewed a jacket recently. Was the Rhett jacket. We filmed Sew Along, and Rhett has a collar and also has buttonholes, and those are two places that I always forced myself to really slow down. Unfortunately, I feel like collar, at least in the case of Rhett, you're 75% done, which I feel like is that place in a sewing project, at least for me, that I'm always wanting to pedal to the metal, get it done, power through. But it was really nice because it kind of forced me to slow down and spend some time at the iron, which I love. But I just love a little precision sewing moment to just help me get in the zone. Gets me in a real place of flow for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting point. I do think there are those points in a pattern where you just want to be done. And for me, the same thing. I was sewing something yesterday, and it was time to make dinner, and all I had left was the hem and one other thing. It was the hem, and there was a tie that I needed to make. And I was just I really don't want to stop, but dinner's going to be really late if I don't go downstairs and at least get started. And so I felt like rushing, you know, and I had to kind of put it aside for a bit and come back to it. But I wonder if anticipating those and seeing, if there's a point in the pattern, for example, with the collar you just mentioned, this is going to be a little bit more complicated. You're going to need to slow down. Maybe that's a good stopping point for you to put a pause and come back to it. And if you can see that in advance, I feel like that would be helpful for me.
Totally.
You can kind of anticipate that, and that it makes it easier to put it away at that point, I think. If you're not telling yourself you're going to finish the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you? Was there a moment in a pattern's construction recently that made you really slow down?
Yeah, actually the thing I was sewing yesterday, it had a kind of an unusual step in that, well, there were a couple of things in it. The pattern was not great instructions wise. It was an old McCall's pattern from the early 2000s, I think. At one point, it's a dress. It was a dress, and the instructions referred to it as pants. At one point, I was
cool.
Okay. Cool. That made me slow down a little bit. But it had an unusual construction. It had a binding on the ends of the sleeves. It had cap sleeves with binding on them. And it was strips of bias, but instead of just regular binding, it was, you folded it in half and you stitched it on, then you turned the fold to the inside and slip stitched it, which was not how I would normally I would just do a binding. And so that kind of forced me to slow down because I had to do some hand stitching. And I think the fact that I've made this embroidered Ames blouse recently that took quite a long time and involved a lot of, it was embroidery, so it was hand stitching, kind of warmed me up to doing more hand stitching because normally I really don't care to do it and I'll avoid it if I can. But I was like, okay, I'm going to sit here for a few minutes in this comfortable chair and stitch for a little bit. And it was fine. I think it brought some enjoyment to the process. I think doing a big hand sewing project like that really made me appreciate how relaxing it can be to do
Yeah.
hand sewing.
Well, it sounds like you sought out that enjoyment. You like took yourself out of that moment, went over to your comfortable chair,
Yeah.
sat down and like did it instead of like, I don't know, staying there hunched over at your desk.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. So I think looking for those moments is really key to
Yeah.
allowing yourself to slow down.
How do you feel like these like slowed down moments affect your overall satisfaction with the end product?
I think they do. I think if you take the time to do something in a way that you know is better, even if it's slower, that always increases my satisfaction in the end because I feel like I really put the effort into it and put the thought into it to do it rather than doing it in just the easiest way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm dissatisfied with, if I had done it by machine, I wouldn't be dissatisfied with it either. But I think the addition of those little hand sewing touches and things like that, and those special things that take a little bit longer, do make you feel a little bit differently about it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it adds like an extra layer of like pride in your end project.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have any tricks for seeking out those moments during your sewing to slow down?
I think for me, it's about embracing the moments when they come up and looking for ways to make them feel relaxing instead of taxing or just something that's going to delay my gratification. I think that's what's really important to me. So, like I was just talking about, going over to the comfortable chair and sitting there with a blanket and the cats around me, of course, because that's their comfortable chair, really. But it just, that really helps. And I think a lot of it is that the mindset that I bring to it. What about you? Do you have any tricks?
You're going to laugh. My trick is that, well, you should be pressing everything always. So I really like to utilize my time at the ironing board as like a pause. It doesn't matter if I'm making like the simplest pullover shell top. I'm ironing frequently throughout the process. And so taking the time to make sure I'm like clipping and grading and doing all of those little details and ironing everything just so allows me to bring like a level of craftsmanship to even like the simplest project. Yeah. And that's my big tip.
Yeah.
Is press everything.
It does introduce a natural pause into the flow, though.
It does.
Because you have to get up, you have to move over to your ironing board or ironing station, whatever you have. And it does help, I think.
I think, too, that like craftsmanship is this really kind of like this term that people hold in a really like high regard in their mind. And I would like to like challenge you listening to rethink the way you're thinking of that term and think of how you can give that level of like time and appreciation and love to everything that you make, not just you're making, I don't know, shoes from leather or like, I don't know, casting metal. I don't know. I think that people reserve craftsmen for these like things that sound, I don't know, really like
highfalutin.
Yeah. I don't think it needs to be that way.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's about the attention you bring to it and the care that you bring to it. And I feel like that can be, it doesn't have to be something that is very slow. I think that's something that often comes with it. And it can be a great tool for slowing down, like we're talking about today. But I think it's more about how much care you're putting into the thing, how much you really get out of it personally, too, and how much it kind of advances your own knowledge, your own skill level, helps you grow as a creative person. I think that's what goes into craftsmanship for me.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to share 8 moments and a few kinds of projects that might help you to slow down. So when we talk about these 8 moments, these are things that you can really incorporate into almost any project you're making and use them as a way to slow down and bring more craftsmanship to the things that you make. So if that's something that you would like to do, if it's something you'd like to think about a little bit more intentionally, this might help you to do it. So here are the 8 things. So the first one are seam finishes. I think seam finishes are a great way to slow down. I remember when I first started sewing and I didn't know about seam finishes because most pattern instructions, they don't mention it. They don't even talk about it. And so I was always kind of like, my clothes always look so handmade because they look like on the inside, they are unraveling. And I would look at clothes in the stores and it wasn't like that. And I didn't really know about sergers or anything like that at that time. And I feel like when I started to learn about all the different seam finishes you can do, whether you have a serger or not, it kind of took my pride in what I was making up a whole nother level. So for me, seam finishes are really, really important to feeling like I have a complete garment that I really put all the love and attention into. Do you have any favorite seam finishes, Haley?
Well, I love a French seam.
Me too. I love one.
I find them like really enjoyable to sew because I get to iron more. And they're just like the garments I've taken the time to make them on. I just feel like I love them like a little bit more. They make me happy when I put them on.
Yeah, it is a beautiful seam when it works. I mean, it only works for some garments. It doesn't work for every garment. So that's what I mean. I think I love a French seam. I also love, love, love a bound seam or a Hong Kong seam on a jacket, an unlined jacket or something like that. My red jacket that I've made, it's made out of a cream colored bull denim. And on the inside, I finished all of the seams with a black and white gingham bias tape. Cute. And it makes me happy. Every time I put it on, I'm just like, oh, look at this. So cute on the inside.
I should have done that. I did a green ret jacket with gold serger thread. I think I talked about this, and it makes me think of a leprechaun.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's a great opportunity to use bias tape too in a cute pattern. I would like to do one again and maybe use like a Liberty fabric or something.
I was thinking like a teeny tiny floral.
Oh my gosh, that would be so pretty. I would love that. It's just like a little treat for yourself. And then other people see it when you take the jacket off. And it just looks so fancy.
It does.
I love that. But I think seam finishes generally are just a way to kind of add that special sparkle. Even if you're the only one who's going to see them, I think that makes it even more special sometimes because you know that you put the time and attention into it.
Yeah.
The next one is hand sewing hems. So oftentimes your pattern instructions will give you the easiest way to finish a hem, which is usually by machine, but you could also do it by hand. And I think sometimes this just results in a really, really nice, clean look, depending on what you're making. So sometimes it just can look really, really good. Do you ever hand sew your hems? Do you often do that?
Yes, I definitely do. It kind of depends. Of course, it depends on the type of garment. I love like a really deep hand sewed hem on a pair of trousers is really lovely. Or anything that I want to just have that slightly elevated look and I don't want any visible like top stitching on the garment, then I will always opt for a hand sewn hem. And it's one of those things that's not hard. It's just time consuming. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Yeah. I think also it can be a good opportunity to use a nice trim on the inside. Like you could use a bias tape to finish the raw edge and tack it, or not tack it, like catch stitch it or slip stitch it. I love that. I had this fancy Marc Jacobs dress that I got from like this discount consignment store in San Francisco. And it was like a peach color. And then it had a tape on the, like a hem tape on the inside. And then it was hand stitched at the hem. And it was just such a beautiful, beautiful detail and just made the dress feel fancy to me, because I knew how much work went into that. And I think just knowing the amount of labor that went into it makes it feel special.
And it's one of those things I never regret. I'm never like, oh man, I'm so bummed.
Yeah.
I made this beautiful hem.
Yeah. So that's a great place to incorporate hand stitching. The next one is basting. Any kind of basting that you need to do, whether it's a sleeve or a zipper, it can be really tempting to skip this step. And sometimes, you can skip it sometimes, but if you take the time to base something in, it often makes the sewing process much, much easier, especially if you're doing something like a sleeve that has maybe some gathering or easing and you want it to be just so. You don't want to have any extra folds or anything like that. Make it just look as clean as possible. Then basting can be a way to do that, especially hand basting. You have so much control when you're hand basting, much more than you do when you're using a machine. So that's another great place to slow down and take your time and create quality over speed. The next one is taking the time to cut single layer. So if you're doing something like stripes or plaids, like you need to match up your stripes or your plaids, or you're cutting something on the bias and need to do it in a single layer, that's another good opportunity to slow down. I think a lot of times, I think people sometimes avoid stripes or plaids just because they don't want to have something that doesn't match. But it can be a really good opportunity to just take your time with your cutting, you know? Personally, for me, the way I like to approach cutting is I try to never cut and sew on the same day.
Yeah.
I'll cut something out one day and sew it on another day. And so this can be a really good opportunity just to take your time with the cutting. You don't have to get it done in an hour. You can really make it special. So I made a bias dress recently, and it did take a while to cut it all out.
It does, yeah.
It is a little bit more time consuming, but I think the result was worth it. So that's another one. Number 5 is turn of cloth. So basically anywhere you need to clip, you need to notch, you need to edge stitch, really making those edges look perfect and clean. Haley kind of mentioned this when she was talking about pressing earlier and really spending time on that. I think this is a great time to slow down is when you're dealing with edges or anywhere where the cloth turns over. Clipping and notching in particular, I think, are really important. Corners too. Making sure you're clipping your corners, using a point turner to get them just right, turned out, really getting your edge stitching right, going slow with that, I think really makes a difference in the garment.
Yeah. I've seen like a lot of people sew. I've taught a lot of people. And something that I would see so often in the classroom is just people are really timid with their clipping and their notching. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
You need to go for it.
Get in there.
Yeah. And just like clip the crap out of that seam, okay?
One trick that this is a little bit of a digression, but one trick that I like for corners, if you're scared of getting really, really close to it, like you're afraid it's going to unravel at the corner. I think I got this from a David Page coffin book, I want to say.
Probably. So many good tips.
Yeah, so many great tips. But it's to sew the corner, basically sew the corner twice. So after you've sewn the corner, go in and sew right next to your first line of stitching, just in the corner, really, really close to it it could be on the inside or the outside, really. It's just to provide a second layer of stitching. And then you can clip really, really close to that corner and not have to worry about it unraveling because you have 2 rows of stitching instead of just one at the corner. So a little hat tip to David Page Coffin for that. I'm pretty sure that's where I learned that.
A treasure trove of good sewing tips. R.I.P.
Yeah, R.I.P. David. Number 6 is pressing. Haley's favorite.
I'm bummed I didn't get to deliver this tip.
Well, we can attribute it to you. Pressing is a good opportunity to slow down. I think that it's one of the things that makes the biggest difference in the look of your garment. If you're sewing with lighter fabrics, it's really important to get those crisp seams. If you're sewing with heavier fabrics, it's really important for kind of flattening things out and making sure that everything lays really well and doesn't bubble. Pressing is vital. And the more time you take with it, the better your finished project is going to look, for sure. Number 7 is embellishments. So trims, embroidery, smocking, handmade bias tape, all that good stuff. There are so many different ways you can add details and embellishments to your garments. And taking the time to do that, I like to do this in the design phase when I'm really planning out what I'm going to make. I love to look at ideas. I have a Pinterest board just for ideas for different details and think about how I can incorporate those into something I'm going to make and then almost base my project around that detail.
Yeah.
And that just makes it really satisfying to me. I like to do that. And it could be something, like I was mentioning earlier, like the Hong Kong seam on the inside, something as basic as that. Or it could be really interesting, like scalloped neckline or something like that. There's just so much you can do with sewing. And I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in what the pattern intends and what the pattern maker has designed that we forget that we can really make things however we want them.
Totally.
And it just takes a little creativity and a little bit of extra time. It's also a good way to slow down. And then finally, the eighth moment that you can use to help you slow down is pattern hacking. I love pattern hacking. I hack most of the patterns that I make, I would say.
Same.
And by pattern hacking, we just mean changing up the pattern. So you could be combining two different patterns together. It could be doing a little bit of basic pattern making to give it a different look or add design lines. There's tons and tons of different ways you can pattern hack. We have tons of pattern hacking resources on our website. If you go to seamwork.com and you look for pattern hacks, you will find a lot there. We have them for a lot of our patterns, different ways that you can hack it, and then you can apply those hacks usually to a million other patterns too. So it's a great way to learn some basic pattern making, but it's also a really nice way to slow down and be a little bit more creative with what you're making. So those are the 8 moments that we have for helping you slow down with pretty much any project that you want to sew. And then Haley's going to share some different projects that can help you to slow down.
Yeah. So if you want to really like take this a step further and make sure that you're not just slowing down at these opportunities that we outlined, but like really focus on a project that is going to force you to slow down every step of the way, these are my recommendations. So number 1 is any kind of jacket with a lining. I always find this to be, first of all, a really satisfying project, but it's also something that's a little counterintuitive, the way that a lining comes together in a jacket. And I think that kind of like mind-bending puzzle aspect of it is a really great learning opportunity and a great moment to slow down. Some of my favorites from the Seamwork catalog include the Keaton blazer, which incorporates a lot of tailoring techniques. So if you would like to dabble in that, I think that's a great project for you. There's the Denise coat, which is a really great introduction to lined coats because it has an otherwise simple construction. And then the Larkin, which is a gender inclusive fit pattern. So we fit that pattern on male and female bodied people. And it's a bomber style jacket, really cute. And I've sewn it and it's wonderful to make. It features a belt pocket, which is a great slow down moment.
You know what I want to do with Larkin in the fall or the winter is I want to make it in like a Sherpa or some kind of like furry fabric like that. I think that would be so cute.
That would be cuddly. So good. I love that idea. Ooh, we got my wheels turning. All right. My next project idea is anything cut on the bias. Working on the bias requires a little bit of extra care. You have to cut single layer and just some like extra precautions to make sure that you're not distorting. We have actually a few Seamwork patterns that are bias cut. We have the Grace dress. Sarai has a really awesome project that she did recently and she hacked it.
I hacked it, yeah. And I show you how to hack it.
Yeah, so definitely go check out that video. We also have the Desi skirt, which is a really great skirt that is a good introduction to bias cut. And then the Savannah camisole. My third recommendation is any kind of button-up shirt. Button-ups have lots of wonderful moments that allow you to slow down. You have the button plackets, you have the collar. It's a project where you are going to spend a lot of time at the ironing board. So the speed of this is really kind of predetermined by all of those factors. We also have some great button-up options. We have the Rachel shirt, which is a little bit more of a slim fitting button-up. We have Bud, which is a shacket, which is kind of a hybrid of a shirt and a jacket. Has lots of those great details. And then we also have our brand new pattern, the Roan tunic, which is a button-up tunic that's really oversized kind of fit. I think that it's very cool if you love that, like, it makes me think of Ina Garten.
Yeah.
I'm like, this
is very coastal grandma there.
It is coastal grandma. That was like what I was going for. So if you like that too, you should check out that pattern. And my fourth tip is to look for details that you've never sewn before. Anything that is unfamiliar is always going to force you to slow down, follow those instructions a little more closely, refer to your favorite sewing book, look for a YouTube tutorial. And I think that that is a great, sometimes I think that we get in a really comfortable place with our sewing and we stop pushing ourselves to learn new things. And incorporating something that has a detail you've never sewn is a great way to really focus on your craftsmanship.
Yeah, totally agree.
And then lastly, look out for details that require a little bit of extra precision. So this could be things like welt pockets, collars, anything that has a reverse corner, which is when inner corner is joined to an outer corner. Things like this that are going to require you to maybe slow down and do the basting or just spend a little extra time to get it just right is always a good moment to develop your craftsmanship a little bit further.
Yeah. I know a lot of people hate welt pockets because they take so long, but I love sewing welt pockets.
Yeah.
They're so precise. And I don't know, it's like putting together a puzzle to me.
Yeah. And I think that the people who maybe don't like it, there's a couple different kinds of methods to doing a welt pocket. I mean, like anything in sewing. So I'd encourage you to like try another method for it because I have a preferred method. And just because I have a preferred method doesn't mean that will be yours.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. All right. Well, to recap real quickly for you, we shared 8 different moments you can use to slow down and embrace craftsmanship in your sewing. And those are seam finishes, hand sewing your hems, basting, cutting single layer like stripes, plaids, or bias. Anytime you're going to turn the cloth, so clipping, notching, and edge stitching, for example, pressing, adding embellishments, and pattern hacking. And then we also shared 5 kinds of projects that can help you to slow down. And those are jackets with linings, anything cut on the bias, button-up shirts, details you haven't sewn before, or details that require precision, like welt pockets or collars. So those are some of the tips we have for you today. What's your big takeaway from the conversation today, Haley?
I think that my big takeaway is that I really want to sew something with a bound seam finish.
Yeah.
I got like so excited when we were talking about it. I was like, that might be a clue as to what I should be doing.
Yeah. I kind of want to do that also with napkins. Like I've seen a lot of cloth napkins lately that have really pretty trims on them like that. And I feel like Liberty, like little mini floral would be so cute.
So cute.
Ooh, I'm going to the fabric store after this. Maybe I'll I'll look for something special. I think my big takeaway from this is that it's all about mindset. And it's all about the mindset you bring to these slowdown moments. And if you see it as like just this hurdle you have to get through to finish your project, it's not going to be as enjoyable as if you get yourself in that craftsperson mindset and really think about how you can use this as an opportunity to make your garment something really special. And when you do that, you just feel differently about the thing that you've made. And I think that's a really big part of finding sewing success is just feeling good about the things that you've made. And anything you can do to feel good about what you've made is going to be time well spent.
Yeah.
In my mind. All right. Well, if you want to learn more about this, Haley mentioned the Rhett Sew Along. So we'll put a link to that in our show notes if you want to check it out. I have a Rhett jacket that I mentioned myself that has the bound seams on the inside. That is a really fun project. And it has some of these special details, but it's not too complicated.
No, it's a great beginner jacket.
Yeah, it's a great jacket. So you can check that out. We have lots of other sew-alongs also. So if you really want to kind of step through each part of the process of sewing something, you might want to check them out. You can go to seamwork.com and find them there. We have a whole lot of them, and they can make sewing something that's a little bit slower or more complicated a lot easier and simpler and more fun and just more approachable. I also want to mention that we have an awesome neckline class that's free. And this class teaches you how to draft your dream neckline. So you can learn to make a scoop or a boat neck or a V-neck or raise or lower your neckline. And it's taught by Haley. And you can find it at seamwork.com/go seamwork.co/necklines. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. That's a really awesome free resource. And I think a lot of people don't realize how easy it is to change a neckline. So once you learn these skills, you'll be able to apply it to tons and tons of different projects and just get into the idea of pattern hacking if you haven't done it before. It's a really easy way to start. And if you liked this episode, please consider leaving us a review and 5 stars on your platform of choice, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you happen to be listening to us today. We have a review here from Miss Michelle, and she says, "Inspirational. I'm so glad to have found such an awesome podcast. I listen to Sarai and Haley as I work out and walk on the treadmill at the gym. I picture what they're discussing, and after my workout, their show notes contain all the links and annotations from the podcast." And Michelle goes on to say some other really nice things. We super appreciate that, Michelle. I love that. I am also a treadmill walker myself, and I know how important it is to have something that is entertaining when you're walking on the treadmill, because it can be a little bit boring. That is definitely my podcast and YouTube time as well. So thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that. And again, if you would like to leave us a review and 5 stars, it really helps other people to find the show. And you can also find us on YouTube at Seamwork Video. We post videos there every week, lots of project diaries and tutorials and tips and tricks from me and Haley. So if you can't get enough of us, that's a great place to go and see our faces as well. You can also follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to join Seamwork and become part of our private community, plus get access to hundreds of sewing patterns and dozens of sew-along classes, podcast listeners get a 50% off lifetime discount when you join at seamwork.com/go/podcast50. So that's seamwork.com/go/podcast50. And that wraps us up for this week. I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio.
Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. Podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork, or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.